from the Four Seasons Hotel in New York City. I'm joined now by Jim Rogers, famed commodity investor and creator of the Rogers International Commodities Index. Jim, thank you for taking the time.
I'm delighted to be here.
So a year ago at this time, you were saying that if the U.S. government continues to make mistakes, it could be the end of the empire. In the last few weeks, we've had President Obama, Ben Bernanke, and Tim Geithner, for lack of a better word, patting themselves on the back saying, we averted a crisis and now we're on the road to recovery. Do they deserve any credit for seeing us through what is the worst economic crisis since World War II?
No, all they did was take a lot of money from over here and put it over here, so these people think that they're better off. The problem is not solved. They're making the problem worse, and not just the financial problems, the economic problem. Now Mr. Obama is taking us into Afghanistan. Same thing ruined the British 100 years ago, ruined us 50 years ago in Vietnam. I mean, it's getting worse, not better.
So do you think that the global economic recovery, or, well, let's talk about the U.S. recovery. Right now we had 2.5+% GDP in the third quarter. Is that just a blip? Are we heading back down into a recession?
You believe that? You believe what the government says?
No, usually not.
You're bad for my nervous system if you believe all that kind of stuff. Look, what has been happening is the government has been printing and spending a lot of money. The people who receive the money are better off, and therefore they think everybody's better off. But remember, when you take money from over here and give it here, eventually these people that you're taking the money away from are going to realize, hey, I'm not better off. Things are not better off at all. And either you have to keep pumping it into these people more and more and more, but these poor people over here are suffering. So no, this is not solving the problem. Papering over the problem is not going to solve America's problems. The idea that you can solve a problem of too much debt and too much consumption, with more consumption and more debt, I mean, it defies belief. I just cannot believe that grown-ups would stand there and say that to yahoo.com.
You're saying it's very wrong for policymakers to continue to borrow money to fuel consumption. What should they be doing at this point? Because they'll say we have to spend our way out of the recession, as President Obama said.
Which is, as I say, laughable in its face. I mean, Mr. Obama, you know, Mr. Obama 6 years ago was a community organizer. I mean, he didn't know much about all this. He's listening to what his people are telling him. I don't think he's the one making the mistakes. It's the people around him. He doesn't know any better. They don't know what they're doing. They're causing problems for all of us. And the way you solve problems like this is what's happened throughout history. When people go bankrupt, you let them go bankrupt. And then competent people come in, take over the assets, reorganize, and you start over. Happened in Scandinavia in the early 90s. They boomed after 3 or 4 years of horrible pain. South Korea, Russia, Mexico, I mean, the list goes on and on throughout history. The countries that take the pain and reorganize and start over have always come out and done much, much, much better.
So we seem to be following the path of Japan, right?
Yeah, we're doing the Japanese model. Like in the early 1920s, America went through a period just like this. Everybody suffered very badly. Nobody was bailed out. And then we had a huge, the 20s, you must have heard of the Roaring 20s. We had a fabulous time in the 20s as things grew and prospered and everybody was having a good time.
Right, but that was after the creation of the Fed, though, in 1913. So
yes,
they might take credit for that.
Well, in those, oh, please, you're bad for my nervous system. In those days, the Fed hadn't run amok.
Right.
You know, it's only been here in the last, well, actually the last 20 or 30 years, because, you know, William McChesney Martin, who was the head of the Fed before, said the job of a good central banker is to take away the punch bowl as the party gets going hot. Volcker came in, you know, took away the punch bowl big time. No, these two guys are going to go down in history as the worst central bankers ever, certainly ever in America.
How concerned are you that there's going to be onerous regulation coming down on Wall Street and on the city in London? There's a new 50% tax
there
on
always
bonuses.
is. The politicians always look for somebody to blame when things go wrong. Do you think the politicians stand up and say, boy, we've really messed up. We're going to resign. Oh, please.
Right.
They blame it on other people. They always have, and they always will. And usually the regulations will make it worse. Now, you remember that the problems that have come out here in the last 2 years came from industries that are unbelievably regulated. Banking, insurance, mortgages. Now, that's where all the problems came from. They're all terribly, terribly regulated. You didn't have problems coming out of the unregulated parts of the world economy. You had them coming out of the regulated parts of the world economy. So now are they going to make the regulations even tougher? It's not the regulations, it's the regulators. They don't know what they're doing, and they didn't do what they were supposed to. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these problems right now.
Right. So more regulation is not going to solve.
We're going to have more regulation. I assure you, we've had it throughout history when we have problems. there's more regulation. But they always come up with unintended consequences and in the end make things worse. Anybody who reads any history can tell you some of the most astonishing things that politicians have done when they blame their problems on other people.